the building makes the decision for you by a fire developing, under the building and wiping it out. So I think the investment's got to be made, and it's got to be made soon. And I'm afraid politicians have ducked that particular challenge because they know there's a very big bill attached to it, and people don't want money spent on politicians' place of work. That's how it will be perceived by the public.
It's a tale of decay because Parliament is falling down. Many of the pipes and cables were installed just after the war in the House of Commons and the House of Lords and should have been replaced in the 1970s. Some of them date from the 19th century. So is it time to relocate, and should we also be adjusting our London-centric vision? Well, to talk about this, we've got Tom Brake, who's the director of Unlock Democracy and former Lib Dem MP. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon.
And Liz Saville Roberts joins us as well. Liz is the Plaid Cymru MP who believes that the location of Parliament perpetuates the interests of South East England. Very good afternoon, Liz.
Good afternoon to you.
Liz, do you get a sense that actually the philosophical argument about where Parliament should be is going to get overtaken by the physical argument about a building that simply isn't fit for purpose?
Well, I mean, the building may well set itself on fire in the intervening period because it has a 24-hour fire watch in some parts of it. It is falling down. I don't think it was particularly well built originally back in the Victorian era. And in the meantime, of course, it has been bombed. And actually, from day to day, the reality is that we're trying to operate in a building that tries to be a catering business, a museum stroke gallery of Victorian permanent polychrome and municipal art, and also a functioning bicameral parliament. All of those things in that space it's not particularly good at doing. But because I am a Plaid Cymru MP, I am particularly interested in what is happening to the United Kingdom and the way that being located where it is, and in delighting in that there is a particular view, a particular proximity to a particular set of interests which perpetuates the inequality of the United Kingdom in itself. And it might be good for the United Kingdom, possibly not from my politics point of view, if Parliament were to move outside of London and put as a priority some other interests.
Right. If you were going to put a pin in the map, where would your preferred destination for Parliament be?
Well, I mean, firstly, for me to say my interest for Wales would be the Parliament of Wales should be in the capital city of Wales, and all the functions that are presently reserved to Westminster and the major decisions should be in Cardiff for Wales itself. If you were then to ask me to stand back and look at it sort of neutrally as to the shape and the demographics of the United Kingdom, you end up looking at places like Birmingham, possibly Manchester, possibly even Liverpool, but somewhere far more central and more in the experience of the rest of the United Kingdom, which doesn't have the economic advantages of the southeast of England.
Tom, what are your thoughts? Where would you put your pin and why?
Well, first of all, I agree with Liz that there are many powers that Westminster has, and people working on issues to do with Wales that we're much better placed in Wales, and the same is true of Scotland and Northern Ireland. In practice, I think if we're trying to level up the United Kingdom, frankly, where Parliament is located isn't particularly key to that question. We, in fact, Unlock Democracy launched a report yesterday called Power to the People, which was about how to secure devolution in England. And the sorts of issues that we think would help that is, for instance, making sure that powers are devolved to local authorities, making sure that the ability to raise revenue was devolved to local authorities. And of course, local people were given far more of a say in decision-making processes at a local level through things like citizens' assemblies.
Yeah.
So where Parliament is doesn't particularly affect that levelling up agenda.
But do you think that what it definitely does affect is the sense of grandeur around our democracy, which that building does gift? And also there's something about how welcoming it is to a certain type of person that you would be able to challenge if, say, Parliament sat in a new build somewhere outside Birmingham?
Well, certainly there's a lot of a lot of changes that need to happen in terms of restoration and renewal in the Palace of Westminster now. So it's not a particularly accessible and welcoming building, for instance, for anyone with a mobility problem. And that's particularly true for anyone who's a member of Parliament with a mobility problem. So certainly those are issues that could be addressed. I think it is possible to restore the Houses of Parliament to their World Heritage status, which they have, and ensure that it is both a building which continues the traditions of Parliament and also provides a decent working environment for the many thousands of staff who work there and the many thousands of visitors who visit the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah, Liz, what do you think about that, though? Because I think, you know, the basic question that I'm asking is why should a certain type of person, probably who's gone to private school, probably who has a confidence being around those kind of old buildings and old places, why should they get to feel more comfortable in our House of Commons and our House of Lords than people who don't have that experience? And people who don't have that experience talk about that, don't they? The slightly intimidating nature of the place.
Yeah, I mean, Tom made some really good points there. Obviously, I'm questioning the structure of the United Kingdom in itself because that's my political interest. But there is the design of the place. To think that the chamber was rebuilt after it was bombed in the Second World War, deliberately without enough seats for the members of Parliament who were there then, so that people never had their own seat, and there was always a squash to get in. And that it, of course, resembles the physical structures of debating societies in Oxford and Cambridge. Some people can walk into the chamber and feel at home, and for other people you walk in and you're afraid of somehow going against one of the protocols without knowing that you've done it, and it puts you in a position of feeling like a very small and inadequate cog in a huge piece of machinery. But I think the other thing that's very interesting about this obsession with tradition, and Jacob Rees-Mogg insisted on perpetuating this when he was the leader of the House, is that, of course, for somebody like myself, it takes me, if I drive to London, it takes me a good 6 hours. If I catch the train, 5 hours, a bit happier. But of course, if I had caring responsibilities for an elderly relative, I wouldn't be able to do anything except I'll have to travel to the House of Parliament. At one stage, we could vote from afar. We allowed those proxy votes. And I know the Senedd in Wales allows people to contribute, as we are now, virtually, and to vote from afar as well. There is something about being caught in this rather toxic nostalgia of tradition that's not allowing us to function in a way that's fair for members of Parliament to be able to participate, be that because of accessibility issues or also, of course, because they have caring responsibilities.
Yeah. Final question to both of you. The cost of repairing the existing buildings is really mind-boggling, isn't it? But do you think it would be any more palatable a proposition to the public to ever suggest that a completely new building was built? Tom?
Well, I think that you have a problem there in terms of moving the building somewhere else because parliamentarians are overwhelmingly opposed to that. And of course, you would have to move a lot of the civil servants as well. So I think that investment needs to be made. As Liz said, there's a real risk that simply the building makes the decision for you by a fire developing, under the building and wiping it out. So I think the investment's got to be made and it's got to be made soon. And I'm afraid politicians have ducked that particular challenge because they know there's a very big bill attached to it and people don't want money spent on politicians' place of work. That's how it will be perceived by the public.
Yeah. And do you ever feel, Liz, a little bit unsafe in the building? Are you talking to us from your office in Wales today or are you in London?
I'm talking from the library in Tywyn, because we've been doing work in Tywyn.
Right. I was going to ask you to show us around and show us where the nearest fire extinguisher was if you were in the House of Parliament. But good to know you're safe. We've run out of time, but thank you both very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Tom Brake there is the Director of Unlock Democracy and Liz Saville Roberts is Plaid Cymru MP.
I'm rather, I don't like the talk of fire destroying the Palace of Westminster. That would be terrible. But of course, it happened at Notre Dame, didn't it? So we can't rule it out. I know they are taking precautions, but I hope they continue to do so. I like Liz's idea of Westminster moving to Liverpool, and I think that could happen. And I propose that it goes to the Liver Buildings, where I was only the other weekend. Glorious views, and I'm sure there's enough space in there.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem increasingly absurd that London captivates the democratic headquarters at a time when there is just so much other stuff to be done across the country. And it is just so true, Jane, that there is a certain type of person who feels at home in that chamber.
Oh, no, I absolutely get that point. But what I was also saying to you earlier was that occasionally when I've been out at night and I go back home in a cab and you go across the bridge towards the Palace of Westminster by night, it's one of the great sights.
It is, but that
just is.
That wouldn't change if, in fact, there were just some luxury apartments and an all-bar one.
Oh, no. And the chance to get a matcha latte and an overpriced brunch.